there, at that moment, some of these same dynamics leading to Republicans jumping up. And then after the Clinton-Gingrich years, you know, that divided government worked pretty well from an independent perspective, right? We actually turned a deficit into a surplus. And then the Karl Rove philosophy came into town, and our country became even more polarized in terms of its politics, but not the people. And then came the election of '08. Many of us were looking forward to that. John McCain versus Barack Obama, two candidates who consciously appealed to the center, two candidates who preached against and ran against the more polarizing establishment of their two parties. All right, let's not forget that, you know, in the world according to Karl Rove, that John McCain never should have been able to get the Republican nomination. Didn't have talk radio, didn't have evangelicals, really only had himself for a long time. But he had the credibility of independence. He'd been railing against the excessive spending in the Republican Party for a long time, and he was able to win the nomination. And Barack Obama took on the Clinton machine. And what everybody forgets about that part of the campaign is, not incidentally, he won independents 2-1 over Hillary Clinton in all the states that were open primaries. That, you know, Hillary Clinton was seen as a fundamentally polarizing force, and Barack Obama at that time was not. But something happened after the '08 election. This rise of enthusiasm. People really thought that a new era had begun. Barack Obama won independents by 8 points. Barack Obama won not only 90% of liberals, but 60% of centrists and 20% of conservatives. That seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? And this is an example just of what happened this year, in the past year. Obama came in, the election was clearly a mandate in one direction only. It was a message to turn the page on the polarizing politics of the Bush era. And liberal Democrats in the House, I think, misread it as a liberal ideological mandate. And independents said, no, I'm sorry, maybe you didn't understand that we weren't voting for the endless spending. We voted for the guy who said he was going to restore fiscal responsibility. We voted for the guy who introduced himself to the American people as, you know, there are no red states, there are no blue states, there are only the United States. Someone who promised to transcend the divides of right versus left, black versus white. Very important divides to be able to transcend, and representing, incidentally, a new generation of perspective on politics. Because somehow, I'm going to take a shot at the baby boomers here, and I apologize, but y'all deserve it a little bit. That the baby boomers' view of politics has always been divided, it seems, between this counterculture movement and then the counterculture movement. There's been this generational grudge match that's been dominating American politics for 30 years. And it's really pretty irrelevant to a whole new generation that sort of looks at things and says, can we all get over the 60s now? Really? Look, I really appreciate the music. Thank you. And civil rights movement, thanks again. A lot of hard work. Appreciate that. But this campus grudge match between the crew cuts and the long hairs, stop, done. What you're seeing here is actually important because it shows that independent voters started leaving the Democratic Party and reasserted themselves as the largest segment of the electorate right around March and April. It's in reaction to bailout backlash. It's in reaction to the stimulus bill. It's in reaction to the unprecedented budget and the deficit spending. And you'll see something also interesting there is that right around the time independents are surpassing the Democrats, Republicans go down as well. Now, they don't have really that far to go. That, you know, Republican identification at that time's lowest any time since Watergate. And the reason is right around that time also, the faces of the Republican Party, and I don't think this lesson is being really learned, were Rush Limbaugh, Dick Cheney, and Sarah Palin. Not appealing figures to independents, folks. And so you've basically seen this trend all year, is independents, again, rising up and declaring their independence from hyper-partisan politics in Washington. You know, my book is called Wingnuts, my new book. And people say, well, what's a wingnut? And I describe wingnuts as someone on the far right wing or someone on the far left wing of the political spectrum. The professional partisans, the unhinged activists, the paranoid conspiracy theorists, the people who are always trying to divide rather than unite us. But there's something else about wingnuts too, and it fuels this dynamic. Wingnuts always confuse partisanship with patriotism. They've totally convinced themselves it's the same thing. And it is not. Our Constitution doesn't mention parties. They're middlemen, at best. And frankly, they're obstacles. And independent voters are declaring their independence to send that message. And it's a consistent message. They voted for Barack Obama. They kicked the Republicans out in '06 because of overspending, corruption, cronyism, and ideological excess. And now they're been sending a message to Democrats along those same lines. Look here real quick, just Virginia voted for Obama. Independents voted for Obama overwhelmingly in '08. Around a year later, they voted for a governor by an even greater margin, sending a message. New Jersey, much bigger margin for Chris Christie, independent swing than for Obama. And then Massachusetts. And this, of course, is the one that blew everybody's mind because it shows really the lie that the red state versus blue state death struggle of our politics is. You know, liberal Massachusetts, right? Let's do the 60. Don't blame me, I'm from Massachusetts, right? I mean, it's stereotypically what was arrogantly referred to as, you know, Ted Kennedy's seat. Well, if anybody bothered to actually pay attention to what's really going on in Massachusetts, you'd notice two things. Not only that independent voters are 51% of the electorate in Massachusetts, but also that the current governor, Deval Patrick, is the first Democrat to hold the spot since Michael Dukakis. Right? Why? Independents like divided government. They're fans of checks and balances. If you're going to have a state house full of Democrats in Massachusetts, they get that, you know what, better have someone minding the store. And the first Republican to win is a good example of what independents gravitate to, and it's what actually Scott Brown is starting to resemble. Is you know, Bill Weld, fiscal conservative, law and order candidate, socially liberal libertarian. That's the kind of candidate that appeals to independents. Independents are not, by the way, this split the difference, mushy middle politics by, you know, scientifically determining what the centerpiece is. Independents are overwhelmingly fiscally conservative and socially liberal libertarian. They're strong on national security, and they hate the polarizing, poisonous hyperpartisanship in Washington. They are non-ideological problem solvers. I talk to mayors. 80% of American mayors are elected in nonpartisan elections. And they see what's going on in Washington or on their television screens and say, that doesn't represent me because I'm elected to solve problems. Vast majority of businessmen, you know, they look at this stuff and they say, you know, you couldn't run a business this way. They're not any focus on solving problems. It's all these old grudge matches that always escalate over time and serve no functional purpose. And that is why government feels like it is so badly broken right now, because people are putting hyperpartisanship over problem solving every day. Florida, real quick, just because here we are. Couple things. That's a county by county map, proportional for how your state voted in 2008. The most important thing to me is actually just the stat in the lower right hand. Gives you a sense of the growth trend. 20 years ago, there were roughly 400,000 independents registered in the state. Today, there are 2.5 million. That growth trend is like this. And the parties are struggling to flatline, which maybe will be the title of my next book, Struggling to Flatline. I mean, young voters are declaring their independence, and it's happening everywhere, but especially in states that grow faster with high turnover. And just, you know, think about why for a second. My generation has grown up with a multiplicity of choice in everything, even before the internet. And politics is the last place where we are expected to be satisfied with a choice between brand A and brand B. I mean, it's sort of Soviet. I mean, it's, you know, we're going to go to the grocery store and it's all brand A or brand B. Well, it doesn't fit the way we live. It doesn't fit the way we think. It doesn't fit the way we understand the world around us. And the parties are desperately trying to hold on to their monopoly. With the rigged system of redistricting, I mean, they're doing everything they can to deny this trend because they don't want to deal with it, because it makes their life more complicated. And I'm sorry, parties, I appreciate that. But you're not the point in politics, people. Parties are not the point. The point is our country. The point is democracy.